Some moments feel like they're meant to crush you. The sound of clattering keys on the airport floor wasn't just embarrassing. It felt like the universe's final kick while he was down. Then he looked up and saw him. Travis Kelce, larger than life, standing just a few feet away. Frustration boiled over, and before he could stop himself, a single reckless comment escaped his lips, loud enough to turn heads. The airport was a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and impatient sighs. Ethan stood at the edge of it all, clutching his worn duffel bag like a lifeline. His heart pounded as he shuffled forward in the security line, the weight of the morning pressing down like a storm cloud. He checked his watch, again. His flight to Chicago was already delayed, but now it felt like time itself was conspiring against him. Behind him, someone muttered about the holdup, their words laced with annoyance. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the tray, spilling his keys and phone onto the slick airport floor. The clatter drew a few annoyed glances, and a woman in a sharp business suit tutted audibly. Heat crept up Ethan's neck as he scrambled to pick up his things. "Come on, man, keep it moving," a voice grumbled from behind. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't just late for a flight. He was late for a shot at changing everything, a job interview that could mean moving his family out of the cramped, drafty apartment in Kansas City. His sister's voice echoed in his head from earlier. "You've got this, Ethan. We believe in you." But did he believe in himself? As he placed his belongings in the tray, his gaze wandered and froze. A towering figure stepped into the adjacent line. The Kansas City Chiefs logo on his jacket was unmistakable. It couldn't be Travis Kelce. The man Ethan had spent countless Sundays cheering for was just a few feet away. Ethan's awe was short-lived, replaced by a sharp pang of bitterness. Must be nice to live a life without worries. His chest tightened. Without thinking, he muttered, "Must be nice." The words hung in the air like a spark, waiting to ignite. Ethan's hands trembled as he shoved his belt into the security tray, the metal clinking loudly against his keys. The line inched forward, but his mind raced. 2 missed calls from his sister and another notification about his delayed flight flashed on his phone. The job interview in Chicago, the one chance to turn things around, felt impossibly far away. He swallowed hard, the sting of failure already creeping in. Then he saw him. At first, it was just the unmistakable Kansas City Chiefs logo on the back of a sleek jacket. But as the towering figure turned, Ethan froze. Travis Kelce, his hero, the man he'd cheered for every Sunday, stood casually in the next line over, chatting with a TSA agent as if this were any other day. For a fleeting moment, awe silenced Ethan's racing thoughts. Kelce seemed larger than life, with his effortless confidence and easy smile. Ethan's mind flashed to the signed poster above his bed, the one he looked at on the toughest nights, clinging to the hope his team brought. But awe quickly turned to bitterness. Kelce's life seemed perfect, untouchable, while Ethan struggled to keep his family afloat, barely making rent and paying for his mom's medication. His chest tightened, frustration bubbling over. "Must be nice to have it all handed to you," Ethan muttered, his voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of the terminal. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Travis Kelce's gaze lifted, locking onto Ethan. His expression was unreadable, calm but focused. Ethan's heart dropped. He wasn't sure if he wanted to run or brace himself for whatever came next. Ethan's heart sank the moment the words left his lips. He hadn't meant to say them out loud, but now they hung in the air, sharp and cutting. His gaze darted to Travis Kelce, expecting anger, indignation, anything but the calm, measured stare that met him. The towering football star tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable, while the surrounding murmurs grew louder. Ethan's face burned with embarrassment. "I didn't mean," he started, his voice faltering. The crowd seemed to close in, judgment heavy in every glance. Ethan reached for his phone, desperate for a distraction. It buzzed again, and he saw his sister's name flashing on the screen. He hesitated, but guilt pushed him to answer. "Hey, Lizzie, I'm in the middle of something." Her voice was strained, the worry unmistakable. "Ethan, the hospital called. Mom's bills went up again. They need another payment by the end of the week." His throat tightened as he tried to steady his voice. "I'll figure it out," he said quickly, though he had no idea how. He ended the call, blinking hard against the sting of tears. The knot in his stomach tightened as he looked down at his scuffed sneakers. The weight of his family's struggles, he muttered under his breath, his voice barely audible over the terminal's hum. Before he could slip further into his spiral, a deep voice broke through. "You okay, man?" Ethan looked up, startled. Travis Kelce had stepped closer, his tone free of judgment, just calm concern. Ethan froze, caught off guard. He wasn't sure how to answer, but something about the way Kelce waited told him this moment was far from over. Ethan's stomach dropped as Travis Kelce took a step toward him. Every eye in the security line was on them now, the tension crackling like static electricity. Ethan braced himself for a sharp retort, a dismissive glance, anything to underline just how out of line he'd been. Instead, Kelce's voice was calm, steady. "Hey, man," Travis said, his tone free of judgment. "Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Why don't we talk after we get through this line?" Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. For a second, he thought about bolting, leaving the awkwardness behind. But something in Kelce's tone, gentle but firm, kept him rooted in place. Numbly, he nodded, shoving his belongings back into his duffel bag as they moved through security. Minutes later, they stood near a small cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee mixing with the faint tang of jet fuel from the tarmac outside. Travis gestured toward an empty table. "Let's sit," he said. Ethan hesitated, glancing around as if this might still be some elaborate prank. But Kelce just waited, unfazed. Finally, Ethan sank into the chair, the tension in his chest easing, if only slightly. Over the next few minutes, the words poured out of him like water breaking through a dam. He talked about his mom's medical bills, his sister's sacrifices, the pressure of trying to hold everything together. And when he mentioned football, how Sundays were the one thing that kept him going. Travis leaned in, listening intently, his expression softening. "That's tough, man," Kelce said quietly, when Ethan finally stopped. "But you've got heart. I can see it. Don't sell yourself short." Ethan looked up, startled by the kindness in Kelce's voice. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered at the edges of his exhaustion. Ethan sat at the gate, the card with Travis Kelce's number pressed between his fingers. The conversation still played in his mind, every word, every pause. "You've got heart," Kelce had said, his voice steady but encouraging. "Don't give up. Doors open when you least expect it." Ethan had tucked the card away, unsure if he'd ever use it, but something about the moment felt like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, The crushing weight of his circumstances felt just a little lighter. 2 days later, Ethan walked into the Chicago office for his interview. The building felt enormous, its glass doors reflecting his nervous face. Normally, he would have been consumed by self-doubt, but Kelce's words echoed in his mind. "You've got heart." He straightened his tie and took a deep breath. The interview wasn't perfect. His hands still trembled slightly, and his voice wavered once. But he spoke with conviction about his goals and his resilience. When the call came later that week with the job offer, Ethan could barely believe it. He held the phone tightly, his voice cracking as he thanked the recruiter, a grin spreading across his face for the first time in months. That evening, while helping his sister sort through the pile of medical bills, something caught his eye. A note from the hospital, marked "Paid in Full." His breath hitched. "Ethan," his sister whispered, her voice shaky. "How did you—" He shook his head, staring at the paper. He hadn't done this. As the realization dawned, his heart swelled with gratitude and disbelief. He looked at the card in his wallet, Kelce's number scrawled neatly in bold letters. Ethan didn't know what to say yet, but he knew one thing. This wasn't over. The city skyline of Kansas City sparkled under the twilight, its towering buildings casting long reflections across the Missouri River. Ethan adjusted his tie for the 100th time, his hands clammy despite the chill in the evening air. The invitation in his pocket felt heavier than it should. He hadn't told anyone, his sister, his co-workers, not even himself fully, why he'd accepted. The grand ballroom was dazzling, its crystal chandeliers scattering light across the polished floors. Laughter and chatter filled the space as sharply dressed guests mingled, clinking glasses. Ethan felt small in the crowd, his off-the-rack suit a stark contrast to the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos around him. A part of him wanted to turn around and leave. Then he saw it. A banner stretched across the far wall, bold letters reading, "Travis Kelce Foundation, Changing Lives Together." Beneath it, a series of photographs and testimonials highlighted the work Kelce's foundation had done, paying off medical debts, funding scholarships, and helping families scan the faces in the photos. A little girl holding a teddy bear, an elderly couple with tearful smiles, a single dad hugging his kids. It hit him all at once. He wasn't just here for answers. He was here because he belonged in this story. "Ethan!" He turned sharply, and there was Travis Kelce, striding across the room with that same easy confidence Ethan had seen at the airport. Kelce's smile widened as he extended a hand. "You made it," Kelce said warmly. Ethan managed a nod, his voice catching in his throat. I had to." Kelce gestured toward the stage, where a microphone waited. "Good, because your story's not done yet." The room erupted into applause as the first speaker left the stage, the hum of conversation resuming as guests sipped champagne and exchanged polite smiles. Ethan stood at the edge of it all, feeling like a spectator in someone else's world. The grandeur was overwhelming. White-clothed tables adorned with intricate floral arrangements, shimmering lights casting a golden glow across the room. It all felt impossibly far from the life he knew. A volunteer had ushered him to a small table earlier, his name written in looping script on a delicate place card. He'd barely touched the sparkling water in front of him, his mind racing. How had he gone from fumbling in an airport security line to standing here, surrounded by people who seemed so sure of their place in the world? The event program lay open on the table, listing countless stories of families helped by the Travis Kelce Foundation. Ethan's eyes fell on one line. Every act of kindness starts with someone willing to listen. His chest tightened as he thought back to the hospital bill stamped paid in full. As if on cue, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he found Kelce standing there, his presence as magnetic as ever. But what struck Ethan wasn't the man's fame. It was the warmth in his expression, the way his eyes seemed to say, "I see you." "Let me show you something," Kelce said, leading him to a quiet corner where photos of families lined a display. Ethan's breath caught as Kelce gestured toward the stories. "This is why we do it," he said softly. Ethan's gaze lingered on a photo of a little girl clutching her father's hand, their faces alight with hope. For the first time, he truly understood. This wasn't just a gift. It was a call to action. The room was small but alive with energy. Strings of white lights hung across the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the crowd gathered in the community center. Folding chairs lined the space, and the faint aroma of freshly baked cookies from a nearby table filled the air. Ethan stood off to the side, adjusting the microphone clipped to his lapel, his heart pounding in his chest. The fundraiser had started modestly, a few families trickling in, then more, until the room was nearly full. Parents held their children close, and elderly couples sat with hands intertwined, their faces reflecting quiet hope. Ethan scanned the room and spotted his sister near the front, her hand resting gently on their mother's shoulder. Both of them smiled at him, pride and encouragement clear in their eyes. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped onto the small stage. The crowd quieted, their eyes fixed on him. His voice shook at first as he began to speak, recounting his family's struggles, the overwhelming weight of bills, and the moment he thought he'd lost all hope. "I thought it was over," he said, his throat tightening. "But someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. That single act of kindness changed everything." The audience leaned in, captivated by the raw emotion in his words. He didn't name Travis Kelce, but the significance of the gesture was clear. Ethan spoke of paying it forward, of how generosity had the power to transform not just lives, but entire communities. As the room erupted into applause, Ethan's eyes found Kelce in the back, leaning against the wall with a quiet smile, his arms crossed. Their gazes met, a moment of understanding passing between them. The ripple had started, and it was only the beginning.